Alice had always known that there was something strange about her grandmother's house. An old mansion lost in time, surrounded by a wild garden that seemed to grow at will. Annual visit was almost a ritual, an imposed tradition, and she never bothered to question it. However, after her grandmother's death, Alice found herself with an unexpected responsibility: inheriting the old house. As she explored what was now her home, Alice felt the presence of the past in every corner, in every piece of furniture that had belonged to generations of her family. However, one item in particular caught her attention. Hidden in the dusty attic, covered in a red velvet cloth, was an antique mirror. Its gilded frame was elaborately carved, with intricate details that seemed to tell stories of their own. Alice, fascinated, decided to take it to her room, unaware that the object carried much more than simple reflections. The first night with the mirror in her room, Alice had a strange dream. She saw herself walking through the house, but everything was different, darker and more somber. As she passed the mirror, her reflection stared back at her, but something was wrong. The image wasn't following her, and instead seemed trapped, watching with pleading eyes. When she woke up, the fear was still there, but Alice decided to ignore it, putting it down to the stress of the recent changes. She couldn't have been more wrong. The following days brought more strangeness. Alice began to notice that the mirror, now in her room, did not reflect only what was in front of it. Sometimes, in a glance, she would see scenes that made no sense. Strange people in clothes from a bygone era, events that had not occurred in her home, or so she thought. One night, as she was getting ready for bed, Alice saw something more disturbing. In the reflection of the mirror, she watched her grandmother, younger, talking to someone Alice could not fully see. The scene unfolded as if in an old movie. The sound was muffled, distant. She tried to get closer, almost as if she wanted to touch the glass and enter the scene, but the reflection disappeared. Alice could not understand what was happening. She searched through her grandmother's diaries, hoping to find some explanation for the visions, but all she found were vague mentions of the mirror, always with a note of caution. There was something deeper, something her grandmother had never told anyone. With each passing day, Alice became more obsessed with the mirror. The visions intensified, showing not only the past, but also fragments of future events, filled with increasing terror. She saw doors closing, shadows creeping through the hallways, and in each vision, something sinister was approaching her. One morning, while drinking her coffee, Alice received an unexpected visitor. She was an elderly, frail-looking woman who introduced herself as Agnes, an old friend of her grandmother. Agnes insisted on talking to Alice about the mirror. It should never have been brought out of the attic, she said, her voice trembling. Your grandmother knew the danger, so she hid it away. Alice listened intently as Agnes told the story of the mirror. The artifact had belonged to a mysterious woman known for practicing dark magic. It was said that she used the mirror to peer into the past and the future, but was eventually consumed by visions, unable to tell what was real. Before she died, she sealed a curse on the mirror, so that whoever possessed it would also be haunted by the same horrors that had tormented her. You must get rid of it, Alice, Agnes warned, taking her hands in hers. Before it's too late. But Alice hesitated. The visions had become a part of her life, and she felt that the mirror was trying to tell her something. There was a pattern to the visions, something she did not yet understand, but which seemed crucial. Against Agnes's advice, Alice decided to keep the mirror, determined to unravel its mystery, even if it meant putting her own life at risk. The nights became more disturbing. Alice began to see her own image in the mirror, but in a way that frightened her deeply. Her reflection showed her pale, with eyes full of despair. She saw marks on her neck, as if someone were strangling her. Once, when she touched the cold surface of the mirror, Alice felt a sharp pain, as if she had been cut. Looking at her hand, she saw a small cut, fresh and bleeding. The mirror had become a door to something darker, something that was beginning to affect her reality. Visions became even more vivid. In one of them, Alice saw herself walking through the house in the middle of the night, with slow, purposeful steps. When she reached the living room, she saw a hooded figure waiting for her. The figure advanced, and Alice, paralyzed with fear, just watched as the reflection showed the person holding a knife. However, before the attack could be carried out, Alice woke up, gasping for breath, and with her heart racing. Panic set in, for now the visions were no longer confined to the mirror. They were invading her dreams. Something terrible was about to happen, and Alice knew that the mirror was the key to avoiding her fate. Determined to understand what was happening, Alice began to investigate the history of the mirror more deeply. She found references in old family diaries, writings that spoke of a series of inexplicable tragedies that always occurred around those who possessed the mirror. One passage in particular struck her deeply. It was the account of a distant ancestor who mentioned a vision similar to the one Alice was having. A hooded figure, red of imminent death, and the mirror ever present. What seemed to be a simple curse was in fact a death trap, a cycle repeated over centuries. Alice realized that the visions were a warning, an opportunity to change her fate. She was not just a spectator, she was the next marked victim. The mirror was showing her the only way to escape, by facing the truth that hid behind the reflection. But there was a problem. With each new vision, the line between the real and the imaginary became more blurred. The mirror was taking control, shaping reality around her. Alice needed to act quickly, before she completely lost her sanity. The night it all ended, the house was plunged into a terrifying silence. Alice knew the moment had come. The mirror drew her, and she let herself be drawn in, descending to the living room, where she felt something waiting. There, the mirror reflected the hooded figure, this time clearer than ever. Alice saw the face behind the hood, and recognition was instant. It was herself, a distorted version consumed by fear. Figure advanced, and Alice, desperate, tried to fight the reflection. There was no escape. The mirror revealed its true nature, a portal to a dimension where past and future intertwined in an endless cycle of terror. When the figure finally struck, Alice felt the cold of the blade cutting into her flesh. The pain was momentary. She was no longer in the living room. The mirror had trapped her soul, and Alice found herself trapped inside it, endlessly replaying the scene of her murder. Just like all the others before her, the mirror would continue to be passed down from generation to generation, always attracting a new victim, always hungry for another soul to capture. The next morning, a neighbor found the house empty. Alice had disappeared without a trace, and the mirror, now in the center of the room, waited patiently for its next owner.